So let's dive into this. While you turn to your Bibles, John chapter 7, the very end of 7 through 8. I was telling Greg, and I told my wife too. So Greg called me, or texted me yesterday at like 9 in the morning and said, hey man, you may need to preach tomorrow because I'm losing my voice. I said, hey, I'm ready. I've got sermons on my computer ready to go. And about 2:30, he texts me and says, my voice is 100% gone. I mean, just make sure you're freshening those things up. So I go look at my computer, and I'm thinking, man, I saved all my sermons from back in Apopka and all this stuff. Now I found one. And it just so happens to be a John sermon, which is kind of funny. And it's one that Greg has already preached, because I went back and listened to his, and I did the exact same thing. So we're just going to regurgitate what Greg said. I'm just joking. Before we read that, though, have you ever wondered what Jesus really looked like? I have. If you live in America, I think we have a picture of it. It's usually the light brownish, blondish hair and blue eyes. The goatee, because they had those trimmers back then where he could look like that. When I actually Googled Jesus, pictures of Jesus, there were so many of these, and they all look the same. But I'm willing to say that he doesn't look like that. If you had to paint a picture of Jesus, sometimes I wonder what would you do? What colors would you use? Is anybody a painter at all? Nobody. My child is a painter. The two kids in the back like to paint. Oh, and Luke does. And houses. You get your palette, you get your colors on there, and you have your canvas, and you just go to town. Okay, if you're Bob Ross, you can make anything out of one color. But for us, would you use dark colors to paint Jesus? Would you use bright colors to paint Jesus? What we want to do today is we want to look at what colors to use to paint our picture of Jesus and how we should look at him. So on the screen we got a verse here. John chapter 7 verse 53 starts off with this. It says, and everyone went to his own house. And where am I going to here? Verse 2. Verse 8 says, chapter 8. But when Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, now early in the morning he came again to the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. So everyone went home. That's pretty self-explanatory in the verse there. Everybody went home, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. As everyone else was going home, Jesus, he had no home. He had nowhere to go, so he went to the Mount of Olives. It's kind of a nomad, I would say. This is neat to see that Jesus had nowhere to stay. In Matthew chapter 8, it says, Jesus said to him, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Okay, so Jesus is kind of a wanderer, which is just kind of cool to think anyway. We see that early in the morning, though, he went to teach. He went to the temple to teach. Okay, this is pretty cool. We see that there are no angels announcing he's coming. Okay, hey, Jesus is here. Come listen to him. We don't see these great miracles. Ta-da! He's not David Copperfield where he's up here one minute and bam in the temple the next. He doesn't just reappear like that. It was the power of his teaching. Okay, that he literally just sat there and started to teach. I mean, seriously, if I got up here, of course some of you may want to leave anyway, but if I just sat here and just started teaching, this isn't really exciting, but that's what Jesus did. And the scriptures tell us that people came. He just sat down. It says that all people were coming to him. He came and just sat down. Unlike the second coming. Okay, totally different than when Jesus comes back again. Okay. The Bible tells us this. There's three things the Bible tells us about when he's coming back. One is he comes back with power and great glory. Matthew 24:30 says this. It says, and the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So you got that. He's going to be seen on clouds of heaven. Matthew 26:64 says this, as Jesus said to him, "It is as you said, nevertheless I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." And the last thing with that second coming, it's just going to be great. Everyone will see him. Every eye will see him. The Bible says this, Revelation 1:7 says, "Behold, he is coming with clouds, and every eye will see him, even they who pierced him, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn because of him. Even so, amen." So, in those first verses there, we see Jesus. I really think we see his humility. Okay, I mean, again, he just comes, sits down, and starts teaching. Nothing great and glorious happening until he starts to talk. The next few verses here, verse 3 through 8, they say this. So then the scribes and Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery, and when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say?" This they said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger, as though he did not hear. So when they continued asking him, he raised himself up and said to them, "He who is without sin among you, let him throw the first stone. Let him throw a stone at her first." And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. So we saw his humility, I believe, in those first few verses. These next set of verses here, we see his wisdom. Jesus, man. So first off, he's in the middle of teaching, and you just interrupted Jesus. Okay? What's going through your mind? You gotta be crazy. You just interrupted Jesus. Okay? There's something, if you want to interrupt me, okay? I didn't help create the heavens and the earth. All right? This guy did. You just interrupted him. So I'm thinking, oh great, here we go. What all does this story have to unfold for us now? So he was interrupted by scribes, lawyers, and Pharisees. These people are known for upholding the law. Okay, that's what these people are known for. So they interrupt him. They bring this woman in. She's caught. Okay, she's caught red-handed. Her hand was literally in the cookie jar. That's what the scripture tells. She's caught in the act. All right, there's no getting around this. She did it. She can't lie. She can't say, "Oh, it wasn't me. It was my twin sister." No, she was caught in the act. That's what the Bible tells us. Verse 5 says this. It says, "Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. What do you say?" Okay? Just picture this for a minute. I mean, it's comical, I think. Again, Jesus is sitting there, he's teaching. They interrupt him, like some rude jerks, okay? And they want to know, what do you say? Okay? I got to tell you this though, that you in the Greek is it's emphatic, okay? So it's almost like what do you say? Okay? What's your opinion? Jesus, I mean, come on. Jesus knew the law. He knew what was going on. Okay? He knew that the seventh commandment forbids adultery. He knows this. He helped write it. He knew his death if you commit it. Okay, Leviticus 20:10 says, "The man who commits adultery with another man's wife, he who commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death." There's no getting around it. Jesus knows. Okay? Jesus followed the Old Testament. Okay? He knew it. Again, he helped write it. And he made it stronger. Okay? Matthew 5:27 and 28 say this. "So you have heard that it was said of those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So legally, she should die. I mean, that's the end. Legally, that's it. You're done. Okay? By all means, she should die. The law says it. But, this is a big but, there was more to their motives. And we know that by continuing to read. First, let's ask the question, though, that I always thought when I read this, and you may be thinking the same thing, where's the guy? If the Bible tells us she was caught in the act, and it's wrong, and you should die, where's the other party? They must have seen him. And if justice is what they sought, if they brought her there for justice, why bring her to Jesus to begin with? He really had no earthly authority. He wasn't a judge. He wasn't a court system. So why bring the lady to him anyway? Just something to think about. It's an open and shut case. You bring her to the courts. You have witnesses. She's caught in the act. Okay, she's going to die. If you put her in the court system and they go through all that stuff, dude, tomorrow morning, high noon, she's gone, whatever it is they do back then. It's an open shut case. We see that their obvious motive, though, as it said, it's a trap. They're trying to trap Jesus. Verse 6 tells us this. It says, this they said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger as though he had heard nothing. So they're trying to get him to incriminate himself, say something that they could use to destroy him in some way. They did this. What's funny, they did this to Jesus time and time again. And I have just a few verses. Honestly, you want to, I say they're rude jerks to interrupt them to begin with. They're a bunch of morons. Okay? They're trying to trap this guy, Jesus. Let's see, Matthew 12:10 says this. It says, and behold, there was a man who had a withered hand, and they asked him, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? That they might accuse him. So they're doing it there. Just a few pages over, 16 verse 1. Says, then the Pharisees and Sadducees came and testing him, asked that he would show them a sign from heaven. Again, chapter 19, verse 3 says, the Pharisees also came in testing him, saying, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? They did this over and over. There's 12 verses I have written down here. That's just 12. Over and over, these guys keep they want to trap him. They want to test. They just keep doing it. And every time, Jesus is Jesus. He just, they throw the pitch up there. He knocks it out of the park every time. So the accusers thought they had him. They thought they had him between a rock and a hard place. All right, we got him now. Okay, she's caught in the act. Here she is. What do you say we do? Okay. If he rejects the stoning, then he would have been guilty of opposing the law, thus discrediting his claim as Messiah. If he agrees, then his reputation of compassion towards sinners is destroyed. Okay? So they're thinking they've got him now. Here, though, the story reaches a climax. Picture this, okay? Picture this. The scene is the temple, all right? The woman, there she is. Her sin is exposed. She's humiliated. She's ashamed. She's there in the middle, surrounded by everybody. Okay? The scribes and Pharisees are there, and they're sitting back probably with smiles on their faces, just waiting, Picture it. Jesus sitting there, there's a woman, what do you say? And they just kind of step back and, all right, yeah, we got him now. We got him. Watch this. Okay? The crowd that was there listening to Jesus, hushed. You could probably hear a pin drop, just waiting for Jesus to say something. For a moment, Jesus really did nothing. But then the Bible tells us he just stooped down as if he's not even hearing them and just starts writing. It's kind of odd if you're sitting out there, 1 minute you're listening to teaching of Jesus, and then the next minute he's just down on the ground just doodling in the sand. You know? There's no really indication of what he wrote in the sand. The Bible doesn't tell us. There are some theories, though. I have a few of the theories here. The first one is, some people think he wrote Jeremiah 17:13, which says this, says, "O Lord, the hope of Israel, all who forsake you shall be ashamed. Those who depart from me shall be written in the earth, because they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living waters." Some people say he wrote verse 7, which is this. So when they continue asking him, he raised himself up and said to them, "He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first." Okay? Some people say he wrote part of the law. Exodus 23:1, they say he wrote that. "You shall not circulate a false report. Do not put your hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness." And some, probably the most popular view of the ones, and again, I'm not saying which one it is, okay? You say what you want. But some say he wrote the sins of the accusers down. Now, again, that's the most popular view. But can you imagine, okay, again, the scene, the temple, the woman, the Pharisees and scribes, what do you say? And Jesus just stoops down and starts writing out, adultery, Billy, and just starts writing the things that you've done. I mean, whatever it is, oh man. How much shame would come across your face? I mean, I know this, like I said at the very beginning. I mean, I surrendered to the ministry in 1997, and from there on, I mean, I wanted to serve in church and do things in church. I've been on a few staffs. I know things that go on in church, and I know how easy it is to sweep some stuff under the rug. I know how easy it is to sit there and not let anybody know what's going on. Look, I'm all right. My life's good. I'm here on Sunday. I dropped my gift in the box, double time, because we're closed Christmas. I do all that stuff. You don't need to know what's going on. I'm okay. But just think about it for a second, man. Your sins, what if we just posted them up on here? I mean, I don't know. I don't want my sins up there. You don't even know what's going on in my life. Crazy old Lance. I mean, the humiliation that if that was it, the humiliation they felt, the shame, how would we feel? Absolutely. So, thinking that they had Jesus, the scribes and Pharisees were persistent in asking him. Verse 7 tells us that, and it's a great verse here. I love it. So he's down there writing, okay, or whatever he's doing. And they just keep asking him. I mean, first you're like, oh my gosh, people, be quiet, just leave. And he kind of just stands up. Oh man, I just love this verse. It's great. Think of the look. I got a picture here. Hold on, don't show it up there yet. But think of the look that Jesus must have given. Okay, again, everything that we've just been talking about. Okay, remember we're talking about his wisdom here. Okay, the look that he gave. He raised himself up. I like to think this. Are there any CSI fans in here? Remember that show? A few of you? Okay, and they made like 12 spinoffs of it. CSI Miami, if you never saw this, or maybe you did, and it's like, oh, that show's stupid. I have a picture of this guy. Okay? Seriously. I mean, he's got the worst looks, man. They just like pierce a hole through your heart, man. Look at that thing. And that's honestly what I think about. Just picture that guy, okay? He's Jesus, all right? He gets up and just gives you that look. And you're the Pharisees and scribes. Remember, you're over here all like, yeah, we got him. We got this guy. And then that look shows up. It's like, okay, maybe we should leave. I don't think we got it. Oh man, that stare down, I love it. So Jesus' response, here we go. He upheld the law. Since the woman was guilty, he broadened the law's power, okay, by exposing the sins of the accusers. John 8, verse 9, first part of that says this, says, then those who heard it became convicted by their conscience, and they went out one by one, beginning with the oldest, even to the last. Okay? So, we had his humility, we had his wisdom, here we have his indictment. All right? After they heard the Lord, okay, after they heard him, they left one by one. So again, they get that look, and I'm telling you, I mean, it's great. I love this story. And they get that look. I mean, you can just imagine it. Oh, he's just piercing with them eyes, man. I mean, what's great though is they're loving eyes as well. And they just like, oh man, we're done. All right, let's go. You know, I mean, how about shame do they feel? Their heads are down. You know, they're talking to each other too, or maybe they're just dead quiet. Because I mean, you know, man, if you're a parent and one of your kids is in trouble, first off, they're talking back. You give them the smack again. But sometimes you sit in the room, man, and it's just quiet. They're walking all slow, too. Thinking you're going to say something to them. Oh, it's okay, Billy. You know, no, you're giving that stare down, too. Yeah, you better keep walking, boy. Okay? That's probably what Jesus is doing, too. Yeah. Doors that way. Don't let it hit you on the way out. That's great. So, the Bible tells us older ones went first. And I think that's important to note here because the older ones are probably a little bit wiser. They've probably been there, done that already. They've had that long, shameful walk. So they left first, man. They were humiliated, defeated, and Jesus got them again. That's what I'm talking about. Ironically, though, those that came to Jesus to shame left in shame, and those that came to Jesus to condemn, they took the long walk, condemned themselves. It's great. All right, here we go. Second part of that verse, verse 9 says this, and Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus raised himself up, he saw no one but the woman. He said to her, woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you? She said, no one, Lord. And Jesus said to her, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. So during that whole time, this is the first moment where Jesus actually addresses the woman. Okay? It's odd, but it's cool. Because Jesus basically says, I mean, first off, we can probably imagine that Jesus already knew all this was going to happen. But he's bending down. Okay, I'm going to deal with these guys first. Then I'll deal with you. And again, hey, if you're a parent, if you've been a parent, you know, you deal with certain stuff first, and then I'm going to deal with that one. I'll deal with that one next. You know what I'm saying? Look, I'm going to deal with your older brother first. I'll deal with you when I'm done. All right? So that's kind of what happened there. Note the term woman. I always thought this was kind of odd, but it's really not. So the term woman, when Jesus uses it, I believe, it's polite. No, I'm not going to go walking around saying, I tried that with Erica the other day. Hey, woman, give me something to drink. I'm still waiting for that drink, by the way. But it's a polite, respectful term, I want to say. He addressed his mother that way, and I won't address my mom that way. He addressed the Samaritan woman at the well that way. He even addressed Mary Magdalene that way. So he addressed women that came in contact with him that were of importance, I would say, that way. It was woman. So maybe we should start using that term. You think that'll work, Greg? No? Okay. So since no one was there to condemn her anymore, Jesus exercised his divine prerogative to forgive sin. Romans chapter 6 says this, "What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Certainly not. How shall we who died to sin live any longer in it?" So this story paints, I believe, just a beautiful picture of Jesus. You got your colors. Instead of that Caucasian male with blue eyes, your colors for the palette. I think that we can. It's important to see Jesus this way. Gracious humility, infinite wisdom, convicting speech, and lastly is tender forgiveness. When you look at Jesus and when you think about Jesus and you picture him in your mind, those are the colors to see him. These are all central themes throughout this story. I believe they're central themes throughout the life of Christ. And they're woven in and out of the Gospels. Okay? Now, what I want to do, you're going to be, you guys love me. You're like, man, Greg, it's only 11:20, dude. This guy's wrapping it up. What I want to do is I want you to, after all of that, I want you to close your eyes. Okay? And I'm going to read the story, not from the Bible, but somebody wrote this. It's the same story, but somebody wrote it. And I want you to listen to it. And as you listen to it, I want you to use those colors we just talked about. I want you to use those and picture this Jesus as you listen to the story, okay? So again, close your eyes and listen to this. Just moments ago, she had enjoyed all the thrills of sleeping with a man she shouldn't have. And only a short time later, she stood naked and beaten before a group of men in the temple, of all places. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. She wanted so badly to be clothed, to get out of there, to turn back time. Thoughts of disgrace and embarrassment that her family would own because of her actions haunted her. The men around her began asking questions to a well-known, if not famous, rabbi. "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now, the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. So what do you say?" When she heard this question, the thought of dying on that very day overwhelmed her, so much that she began to sob out loud. She knew the law. It was sacred and holy. She knew she had to face death for her actions. To not do so would break the very law these men were commanded to enforce. She knew her fate, and she threw herself down on the ground, waiting for the rabbi's command. But he said nothing. The crowd grew irritated and began asking repeatedly the same question, increasing their volume. But still he said nothing. She wanted to know what was happening and what the outcome would be as fear and shame raced through her. It seemed like eternity. And all the while she was waiting for the first stone to come flying out of nowhere and hit her. She just wanted it all to be over. How could it have come to this? She had betrayed her God, her family, and her husband. Sorrow finally overcame her, and all that flowed through her mind were the words, "I'm sorry," over and over again. Finally, the rabbi said, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw the stone at her." The next thing she heard, stones hitting the ground one by one. She looked up and saw only the rabbi there. He asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She lowered her head and immediately began to weep uncontrollably. Suddenly she felt a hand on her head and a blanket cover her bare shoulders. She didn't want to have to raise her head and look the rabbi in the face. Although the threat of death was gone, shame and guilt were as present as they had ever been. She started to wish they would have killed her anyway. The rabbi called her again. "Woman, where are they? Has not one of them condemned you?" Through her tears, she answered, "No one, Lord." The rabbi gently lifted her head with his hand. As her eyes met his, a strange quiet fell over her. And for a few moments, he stared into her soul. He said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." So now that you've got Jesus in your mind of his response to this woman, I love how that story puts it. When she finally looks up, all she sees is the rabbi, is Jesus. How many times in our lives do we just need to look up? Forget the chaos of what's going on. I understand things happen in our lives that control our lives some, and we can't get past them, but how many times do we just, hey man, just pick your head up and just see Jesus? And that's awesome.